the quote is, don't just marry someone you can live with, but marry someone you can't live without.
Yeah, that's kind of a romantic thing to say. And I agree with that to a point. Again, all analogies are all, you kind of take them with a grain of salt in a
Yeah.
sense. Because you might think you can't live without this person until they change.
How do you know if someone is a Christian?
You don't. True. I mean, short story.
Yeah.
Short answer is you don't. But there are ways we can kind of get a clue. It's interesting. I was remembering this morning for some reason. I was remembering this cartoon that I watched when I was a kid growing up. And I don't know if you ever watched cartoons, but I just remember the one that I'd see where there's a bunch of sheep in the field and there's a wolf trying to get to the sheep, but he can't get to the sheep. So he finds sheep's skin and he puts that on and he puts it on his head like a sheep,
Yeah.
and he's walking into the pen. That's how he can get close to the sheep, is looking like a sheep, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes we have people who look like Christians, but they're wearing the right clothes, but they're not necessarily, their heart's not in the same place. They're not there for the right reasons.
Yeah. Okay, I was at Walmart and I was getting a bird feeder and I overheard this like guy say, he was talking to two ladies and he was like, I'm a good boy. I'm a Christian. I go to church every week. And the way that he said it just was so suspicious to me. I was like, I don't believe you. Like it was so odd.
Yeah, because that could be a pickup line. It could be real, but it could be a pickup
Yeah.
line.
I'm like, why are you flexing that?
Well, and the sad part about it is sometimes a pickup line. I can't tell you how many women that I've met in my office who come in at some point after they're married and said, I thought he was a Christian. He said he was a Christian. He went to church with me, but now he won't anymore. Or now so yeah, how do you know? How do you know anybody is a believer? If that's an important thing for you, I think a lot of and we're talking mostly to women, so I'm just going to say it outright. I think a lot of times women let down their guard and they don't stop and say, hey, is this guy really what he says he is? And how do I know? And we look at things that are happening in like on Hollywood and stuff, things that are coming out in movies and shows and things. What's the first thing that happens? That they're trying to show romance and all that stuff. What's the first thing that happens when two people meet?
They fall in love.
They fall in love. It's like love at first sight, and there's sparks and there's all this stuff. And yet, how do you know that that's really the person you're supposed to be with?
This is like the thought of the century, the question of the century, because I see so many like relationships where like they fall in love and they fall so quickly out of love, or they also get married or they get divorced really quickly. And there was I was having a conversation with a gal and we were talking about weddings, and she had said that the most expensive wedding she's been to, the couple was divorced very recently afterwards. And that just seemed to be like an interesting pattern. Not that, rich people don't have long marriages. It's not saying that.
A lot of the most expensive weddings aren't by rich people. They're just by people who've got into a great deal of debt to have a wedding.
Why do you think there's so much obsession over that? Over like this idea of love?
Is it love? Well, we were talking two different things. Is it love or is it like the appearance of love? I have throw this fancy wedding. What does that really mean to people? If you don't just have a church wedding and a punch and cake in the basement of the church, what does having, throwing a giant wedding mean about the people who are getting married?
Do you know?
Well, I'm just asking. Yeah, no. So I'm just asking you.
Well, I don't know.
What does that seem like to you?
I mean, it seems like superficial.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's costing an arm and a leg for a party for other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that, if we want to stick with the kind of the idea of what, love, and how do we know if somebody is when we ask the question, how do we know if they're Christian, we're asking how do we know they're authentic? So whether it's Christian or any other thing, when people say to you that when they present themselves in a certain way, how do we know that it's authentic?
I think it takes time.
Yeah.
There's no substitute for time.
And by time, you're meaning what?
It's different for everyone. Some people, it may take years. Other people, it may take months. Um, by time, it really means you're seeing them in a lot of different lights, different experiences. How are they like with their family, with their mom, with their sister? What are they like with your friends or with their friends? I think especially when you're looking at the community they've built up over time, you can see patterns of their character.
And I think that you're right. It's over time. It's also over different scenarios or different situations. Who are they? What are they like with you? What are they like with other people? I really think one of the tests also is what are they like when they're talking to people who are serving them. A waiter, a waitress. They're at the DMV. What are they like when they're with people who are serving them? Are they impatient? Are they patient? Do they have do they get cross easily? Do they act better than everybody else? I mean, those kind of things are clues to what kind of person is really underneath the
Yeah.
surface.
But someone could put on a good show. Do you think love is a step of faith?
No.
Why?
I think love is a chemical reaction in our brain.
I don't think that. I think in love. Well, okay, I know you're going to agree with me at the end of this.
Okay, go ahead.
Because I just know you. But being like in love is like a chemical reaction. But to me, the best relationships that I've had were not ones that, and I'm not even talking about like a romantic relationship. I'm actually talking about a friendship. So I have a friend, and to be honest, where we did not really jive well at the beginning of our friendship because I was just this little introvert, a little loser who didn't want to hang out with anyone. I always tell her, no, I don't want to hang out right now. I'm busy. I don't know why I was like that. I just was like to be a loner, I guess. And she'd always just like be like, no, like let's hang out. I want to see you. And she showed me love in a period of time where I was really struggling and just was like devoted to me, like in a way. Not in like a weird way. She had so many other friends.
Well, there's so many different kinds of love. What you're talking about sounds a little bit like agape love, which is like friendship love. There's so many different types of love defined. Other countries, other cultures, other languages have multiple different types of, they can define it in different ways. Romantic love and agape love is different. I love hamburgers, that kind of, we use the word love for a lot of different things.
Yeah. I think love is devoted. It's like love is patient, it's kind, it does not envy, it's not proud.
What you're talking about there is not love as a feeling, but love as an action.
Yeah, because love is an action word.
Right. Well, it's both. We do love things, people and things around us. We feel a sense of attraction or affection for some things, but love as a feeling word is different than love as an action word. When we love somebody with, as an action word, we're saying, I care for you, and I'm going to show you by this action. I'm going to show you by being kind. I'm going to show you by deferring to you whenever I can. Is somebody consistently showing love in that way, or are you? When you ask the question, how do you know if somebody is authentic in either their belief or their love for you? Are they demonstrating it in ways where you're not getting this little weird feeling of something's not quite right, but I really want this guy to love me, or I really want this guy to be what he says he is. Sometimes I think we miss little cues along the way. I talked with some women who have gone through abusive relationships. And one of the questions I ask every time I talk to somebody like that is I'll say, when was the first time you realized that he was capable of this? And usually they'll say that the first time they realized it was like on their wedding night or shortly after their wedding, when all of a sudden things were, like locked in.
Oh, heck no.
And
don't make me throw
and
up.
they cried themselves to sleep that night. Or they started, and at that point they feel like they're locked in and I can't get out of this, and I got to make the best of it. And so then I'll ask the next question. I'll say, okay, but when you were dating, you dated for 6 months or 9 months or a year, whatever the time period is, when you were dating this person, was there ever a time that something just didn't feel right, but you excused it in some way? And sometimes people would say things like, well, he was always so kind to me, but he was really mean to the waitstaff. He was really rude to waitstaff, and that's not who I am, and it made me feel uncomfortable. But then I said, well, what caused you to excuse that then? And they said, well, a lot of times it'd be something like, well, but he was trying to protect me because my food wasn't just right, or something like that. And so they excused it away in one way or another. And I think that's the thing that I want to really encourage women to focus on, is to realize no one is perfect, and you want to know kind of what other people's imperfections are and whether or not there's something you're willing to live with. You're not looking for Mr. Perfect. You're looking for a chance to say, okay, I think I know this person and I still love them. I know that sometimes they have a tendency to swear, or they have a tendency to do something. It's not my favorite part. I'm not going to, I can't try to change them, but it's something that they have all these other good qualities. So you want to know who is their authentic self? Are they showing you their authentic self? Mm-hmm. And is that somebody that you can live with?
There's this quote that Mom said that you have, and that the quote is, don't just marry someone you can live with, but marry someone you can't live without.
Yeah, that's kind of a romantic thing to say, and I agree with that to a point. Again, all analogies are all, you kind of take them with a grain of salt in a sense, because you might think you can't live without this person until they change, until they show their true character.
That is true. So, like, when you were dating Grandpa, how did you know, like, he was the guy you wanted to marry?
I didn't at first.
Oh, really? How long were you guys dating for?
So we actually, our first date was senior prom, and he asked me a week before the prom, because we didn't know each other, and we kind of met through some friends, mm-hmm. and the friends were trying to hook us up because they knew neither one of us had a date, and so he came and apologized for something that had happened. And he said, and I was still in class, and he met me outside of my class, and he said, hey, I'm really sorry. And, we talked a little bit, and then he said, well, if you don't have a date and if I don't have a date, then maybe we could go as friends.
Oh my gosh, bro. I'm thinking of him being so nerdy. Oh,
what?
He had these like glasses on. Yeah. He just looked so derpy.
Well, keep in mind, let's
show a picture of him?
If you want to show a picture, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay, so you guys went to the prom, and then what happened next?
Prom. So we ended up dating all summer.
Okay. Oh, okay, so he just said, let's go just as friends.
He did.
And then you guys
No,
dated
that's fine.
Summer.
And then we just hung out as friends for the next, yeah. So we kind of dated off and on a little bit. We went out with friends. He had a group of friends. Some of them were my friends, and we just hung out together. I remember we went to a couple of different times. We went to parks to throw frisbees around and things like that. We got together a couple of times by ourselves, but we got together with friends. I got to see how he was around his friends. Got to see him interacting with his friends and stuff.
Oh my gosh. What was he like?
Oh, he was just like he is. You know who he is. Anyway, the end of the summer, we were going to go off to different places to college. He was staying in town. I was going off to Kansas to go to college, and he sat me down and he said, we'd been dating pretty regularly at that point. And he said, well, we're both going off to college. We've got 4 years ahead of us. We'll keep in touch, but we'll each date other people. And
at least he was honest. No, yeah. I appreciate that.
And he says it's not realistic to not date other people. And so he says if we're still care about each other in 4 years when we're done with college, then maybe we'll consider getting married. So that was the conversation we had in August before I went away to Kansas. And I'm getting on the plane to fly away, and I'm thinking, okay, he's breaking up with me.
Oh.
which is kind of what I had thought. We had a great summer. And I did date somebody else.
Stop, Sharon. Tell the story. Tell us,
No.
Please.
For another time. But anyway, it didn't last long. And that guy was not transparent. He was not authentic.
Okay, tell us a little bit more about that. Like, what was your experience? You don't have to go into like all the details, but like, what do you mean he was not authentic?
He lied to me, and then he went off out with somebody else while we were
Oh,
supposedly going together, or dating, and
yeah.
that wasn't cool. Um, anyway, so I had come back home for around Thanksgiving, or no, it wasn't before Thanksgiving. It was like in October, and then my plan was to break up with your grandpa because he was writing letters that sounded more and more like he didn't like being away from me. And I was thinking, I don't know what I believe anymore because if I really cared for him, would I have dated somebody else? And so I was going to come back and just kind of tell him, no, let's just break it off. And I couldn't do that because he walked in. He was so cute
Oh.
and so sweet. And so we didn't break it off. And
No, wait, share the story with the credit card.
the credit card,
Yeah.
it wasn't a credit card. It was an ID card.
Oh, an ID card.
Yeah. He came down to Kansas to spend a January term with me in the same school. And because our schools had the same January term that it was like sister schools kind of thing. And he came up he brought me back after Christmas to school and signed up for his class and I was at the lunchroom, and the guy that I had dated briefly was at the table with my roommate and just some of the friends that we had. And your grandpa came up to the table and he flapped down his ID card because he had to get that for going to school at that school. And it was just, my roommate was like,
That's so batty of him.
he didn't know
That's
what
my
he was,
girl.
yeah, he didn't have a clue. No, he was just showing, he was just, anyway. I don't know why we got talking about that, but anyway. I think the thing I think you're kind of wondering about how I knew, and I think that the point by the end of the semester, I think by May, we ended up deciding to get engaged, and I think at that point it was like there's just a part where you get to know somebody so well, and they feel like I don't want to say the missing part of you, but they feel it. It feels kind of like, here's a person who is my complement in a lot of ways.
Uh-huh.
You don't want to necessarily find your ideal match because you want someone who's got a strength in areas you don't have strengths in, and maybe is weaker in the areas where you have strengths, and you complement each other to the point where it just feels like we've always been together. And that's when I knew.
Josh and I are like just twins. It's so creepy. Like, it's so creepy. We have like the same thoughts. No, like we were watching this show and I had this thought in my head. I'm like, oh, this reminds me of an influencer I know. And then he's literally said it out loud. And stuff like that keeps happening.
That's okay. Those kind of things are good. It's, you know each other well enough that you can almost think what the other person might say.
Mm-hmm.
Now that can get to be a problem as you go down the road. Because what I see in couples a lot of times is after a few years, you get to the point where you think you know what the other person's going to say. And that's when you start talking over each other, because it's like, okay, I know where he's going to say, so I'm going to have a rebuttal for what I think he's going to say. And it may or may not be the same. You want to always have some curiosity, because maybe sometimes he's not going to say the same thing, or you're not going to say the same thing he is.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks so much for watching, gals. We hope you enjoyed this episode. And just remember that when choosing a partner, it takes time and experiences to really get to know someone and who they are. So we hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you gals soon.